Hello, so this is a review of H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, and it was certainly it was very long. H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness was very long. He that's literally what the story is. It's just so long on describing and being very descriptive, and and just lots of world building to the point where it's just like really annoying, like irritating and tedious. Um, H.P. Lovecraft would use. He did lots of studying. He certainly did lots of studying. He would on the Antarctic, because the story is based in the Antarctic area. It's science fiction horror. Like she's like Aliens, like the film Aliens, has like kind of atmosphere. Inscriptions on like lead like cubes, spectacles. But yeah, the world building. He does lots of world building to the point where it's just tedious. Like Clark Ashton Smith, for example, he would use lots of words, obscure, archaic words, and he would he would like make like 2 or 3 pages of using obscure, archaic words. Not archaic words, but like obscure, outlandish words, and yeah, it's more convenient, more comfortable to read. I mean, it's still strenuous and arduous to read Clark Ashton Smith, but it's more satisfying. It's more satisfying if you read Clark Ashton Smith, uh, and then what reading 10 pages of H.P. Lovecraft describing, these vacant rooms and vacant caverns with inscriptions, because he goes too much about. He doesn't use obscure words. Well, he does at times, but not as much as Kaz. But um, he certainly he describes things in a manner you can't really use your imagination efficiently. Like he would describe things being, because I'm terrible at math. I hate math. Well, actually, I don't hate math, but I'm not that very good at math. And he'll use words. He'll use He'll use clauses using like 600 feet tall, 700 meters width. Like he'll use a lot of that at times, and it will it will confound you at some points, because you know because like why would you want to hear that? It's boring. Like hear all that stuff, all that descriptive talk. So, but he did study an encyclopedia. It's like you're reading through an encyclopedia towards the beginning. At the beginning of the story, he just goes on, and then he talks about the aliens, their livelihoods, their civilizations, how they're intelligent, they came from space. Uh, and then there are some very worth, but at the end, it's still worth reading. There are couple cuts. There are a couple of scenes that really shock you and scare you. Like at the end of chapter 9, that part scared me when they find Gedney and the missing dog covered in a tarpaulin. All frozen dump. But moving on. So the story basically, two scientists who go and explore a cavern in at the mountains of Antarctic. These huge, enormous, cyclopean Antarctic buildings. And it's basically the typical the story, the plot is basic. It's the typical person in that cavern, and he runs away and tries to escape from the monster. Similar to The Weaver and the Vault and Tombspawn by Clark Ashton Smith. Those two stories, same concepts, but this one is more like Cthulhu and cosmic horror type of atmosphere. It's also very atmospheric. Um, so he finishes. So basically, yeah, these two people explore a cavern. They find inscriptions. They try to decipher alien alien inscriptions on their civilizations in their cities and their walls, and how it tells their civilizations and their history. And then finally, towards the end, they find the two scientists discover Gedney and the wolf, or the missing dog, the quadpetal, or something like that. And he and so they continue looking for Mr. Lake, and which is another scientist that was missing from the camp, because the camp was scourged by these aliens, by the old ones, or the Shoggoth. No, by the old ones. Or by the Shoggoth. No, I think it was the Shoggoth or something. It has multiple eyes, slimy, is bleak, is black, you know. And so they find out this camp was scourged and attacked, and there's just complete havoc. And the scenes described, like that part, that's what thing about atmospheric writing. You describe like 5 hours of what's going on, like so much descriptive of what's going on, describing the world and everything, and then out of a sudden, finding some action occurs. This camp gets scourged and attacked. And there's just brutality everywhere. Dead bodies, corpse decapitated, um, chopped up. Dogs are massacred. And yeah, that happens, and then so the two scientists go on and try to look for the two missing people from the camp, Gedney and Lake. And Lake stays missing throughout the whole story. They never find them, but the two scientists discover inscriptions in these walls, and they continue looking for stuff, looking for Lake, and then they find out. They eventually make it into a room. Oh, and there's also a funny scene where it also gets really fantasy-ish, because H.P. Lovecraft creates enormous squawking penguins that are albino and blind, and enormous squawking grotesque penguins. So it's sort of good. He goes out of the box of science fiction and gets into fantasy sometimes, because of that. But the penguins had nothing to do with the story. It was just some world building, and so they discover penguins. The two scientists, exploring and sojourning in these, or having excursions in this cavern, discover these penguins, and then they move on, and then they discover the Shoggoth, the monster Shoggoth, with multiple eyes, slimy, gooey. They get chased down by him, and they eventually manage to escape the cavern and then get into the airplane and take off. And then one of the scientists, one of the two scientists, which is Danforth, whose name is Danforth, gets into like which is a gets into like a psychological negative affection, and becomes mentally ill, and repeats um a phrase, to Kelly. But then, which which is part of the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft, and what he's trying to confer or convey. But yeah, he mentions Clark Ashton Smith in this story, and at the Mounds of Madness. He mentions his one of his monsters, Tasagwa, one of his scary monsters, Tasagwa. So you can really show that he mentions him. H.P. Lovecraft mentions Clark Ashton Smith and Tasagwa. I mean, in At the Mounds of Madness and in Cthulhu. So he really does show his fondness towards Kaz and Clark Ashton Smith, which I personally find very interesting. But yeah, I rate this story 8 out of 10. I rate this story 8 out of 10. It's definitely worth reading if you have lots of free time. Because for me, when I read, I like to read slowly. So it took me like about 3 days or 4 days to finish reading this story. I like to read slowly. It was a dictionary. I have my dictionary beside me. I always look up the words. I try to perceive my literature as much as I can. Sometimes I'll just bypass some words that don't even care about. But I try to perceive. I like perceiving my literature as much as I can, decipher it. You could just read it through, and I'm pretty get the concept of what Ishii Lookaf is trying to say, and he conveys his plot if you just skim through it in 1 or 2 days. But yeah, Ishii Lookaf, yeah, but again, you can't achieve this with Clark Ashton Smith. He goes so into dense prose, you have to have a dictionary beside you. You won't even be able to perceive the plot if you don't use it. You have a dictionary or look at words that Clark Ashton Smith in Clark Ashton Smith's literature. So that's why I see H.P. Lovecraft is more of a less artistic writer than H.P. Lovecraft. You can get through. H.P. Lovecraft is kind of prosy, just Pulp Fiction prosy for people for just conventional mediocre readers. Like nowadays, modern readers read modern literature, which is not that dense or artistic like the literature back then. But yeah, it's definitely worth reading. This is if you're a new. I recommend this story if you're a new H.P. Lovecraft if you're new at getting into H.P. Lovecraft. It's not racist. H.P. Lovecraft has some racist literature, and this story really does show him. This story really just show him as an atheist and an individual, and not disclosing any of his racist aspect of his personality. This story is great for that part. The Outsider, which is a macabre story. The Outsider and At the Mounds of Madness are the two stories I believe people should at least give a chance to read. If you're not really into H.P. Lovecraft but you want to get into him. So those two stories, but the rest, like The Rats in the Walls, The Shed Over Innsmouth, the Call of Cthulhu. People recommend that one. I don't. It's racist. All these three are racist stories. All these three so far that I've been reading. The Rats in the Walls, Call of Cthulhu, and The Shadow over Innsmouth. All these three. so far than what I've been reading. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of other literature. Like I never read these, but like the Hunter. Oh wait, no. The horror at Red Hook is clearly racist. The plot is racist. Um, Polaris, I heard, is also racist. Oh, the transition of Juan Romero is also racist. Mo- um, yeah, most of these stories are pretty just show racism. So I should recommend these stories: The Outsider and the At the Mounds of Madness. And that's it. Just read those. Like, if you want to get into like horror literature. But other than that, yeah.